and welcome to another potluck wrap up where I wrap up all the books that I have read recently by putting them in this teapot and pulling them at random. I read about 8 or 9 books in Feb. It wasn't a lot. It was certainly more than January, but it certainly wasn't a lot, and a lot of those were audiobooks. So there aren't necessarily a lot of books in front of me, but there are a lot in this teapot because there are still some left over from last year. Thankfully, I did manage to wrap up a couple of the ones that were from July last year in my last potluck wrap up. So thankfully I don't have to think too far back with this one, but it still has the potential to be an absolute mess, as much of my content does. So, without any more preamble, let's go with the ting. One of these days I'm going to do that and it's going to break, but until then, amazing. I really want to get another gothic teapot so I can put my Patreon prompts in it. So if you spot any really gorgeous gothic teapots, please let me know. As always, I only give myself 20 minutes to wrap these books up, otherwise I will waffle. So the first book I'm going to wrap up for you today is going to be Blue Exorcist Volume 1. This is one of the ones that I bought from Forbidden Planet in Newcastle because I was left alone with Jamie for 5 minutes and he is an enabler. So every manga that I picked up, having heard something about, I picked up. This one was recommended casually to me through Gem. I keep going to call it Bookish Gem because I can never remember the new name, and I'm so sorry, Gem, but I will tag you down below. And was one that I knew very little about, other than the fact that everyone seems to really, really enjoy it. I can definitely see why. I did find this quite fun. It was quite a fast-paced adventure. I just don't think it's a series that I will commit to. There's a lot of really interesting religious imagery because it's about priests and demons, but it just didn't hold my attention as long as I thought it was going to. It just didn't grab me the way other graphic novels and mangas have grabbed me. So because I need to be sensible about the amount of series I commit to, mainly because I have every intention of later today filming all of my series that I'm currently reading or have caught up on, this just wasn't one that I wanted to add to that list. So if I see Volume 2 somewhere nice and cheap, I may continue it. I might even put it on my wish list, but for now, Blue Exorcist is a series that I'm just not invested in. But it's not to say I wouldn't recommend it. It was fun. It just wasn't for me. Okay, next. We have Lightbringer by Pierce Brown. This is the most recent, although we are due very soon. I think either later this year or early next year, the final installment in the Red Rising series. I adored this. It was 5 stars. Every book seems to get more epic and more powerful each time. I read Iron Gold and Dark Age and wrapped those up last year. And I read this, in November of last year. So pretty much towards the end of the year. And it was a great way to end the year reading wise. It's a very, very powerful story. It's very much like a space politics war type scenario. And for those of you who don't know much about Red Rising, essentially people are organized by colors into different factions, and the Reds are essentially slaves. They are terraforming planets and mining for things, except the work is kind of already done, and they think they're building this paradise, but everyone else is already busy enjoying the paradise and not Reds. And the main character, Darrow, after some awful things happen to him, kind of takes it upon himself to rid the world of the scourge that is Golds, and kind of rebuild a more democratic world where colours are utilised and not treated as slaves, essentially. It's a really interesting, really powerful thing. I know there has been some discourse around Pierce Brown's comments with regards to Palestine. I think at the moment it's really interesting. There are quite a few authors that their books I enjoy, but they are showing their arse when it comes to their views on Palestine. And I think it was particularly difficult for people to manage thinking about that, because considering his books are about oppression, his books are about fighting for survival and the horrible things that happen during war. If anyone's going to be an expert, it's going to be someone who has written an incredible series on that subject. There should have been more empathy from him in regards to that. That's not to say that I wouldn't recommend the series. It's just recommending it on the basis of, if your morals do not align with that, or you don't feel that you can pick up a book recommended by that. Like, I don't think I would... It's weird. I don't think I would pick up books from someone new that had that. I love this series. So it's really, really hard. I am not one who usually separates art and artist. I think fundamentally art is not made in a vacuum. It is inspired by the artist, and it is inspired by their experiences, morals, values, beliefs, etc. So I find it really bizarre that he would write such an epic series about liberation and about fighting against oppression and then make the comments that he made. I don't remember if he backtracked on any of those or if he just went quiet. I know stuff has gone quiet about him since then, but when I read this in November, I know that a lot of people had a lot to say about what he had to say about Palestine. So bear that in mind. This is one of those things where I really enjoyed this series. I would completely understand if you came for me for recommending it. Okay, next. Oh, I picked up 2. When I shuffle them around, they must just start clinging to each other, at which point I end up picking 2. So the next one is Saga Volume 10, which is another sci-fi epic, much like Saga, much like Red Rising. Another one that likes to break my heart. I also found this one devastating. Because this is Volume 10, I'm not going to go too much into what happens in this volume specifically, but just know that I adored it. I didn't find it as traumatizing as Volume 9, but I still found it pretty traumatizing. And basically this is about a kind of Romeo-Juliet type couple where they come from different opposing sides, except they have a baby. At this point, she is no longer a baby, and they're basically fighting for their survival as well. There's a theme here of things that I enjoyed, and I think that one was a November one as well, actually. Oh no, August, so earlier in the year. Really, really enjoyed this one. Volume 11 is out, but I don't have it yet. I have every intention when I have money of getting myself Volume 11 because I adore this series. And I know it's one of those series where people see it everywhere. If people read graphic novels, they tend to recommend Saga. And it can be that sometimes this series is too hyped. It is hyped for a reason. It is really good. There is such an interesting dichotomy of characters. There is such a variety of LGBT and BIPOC characters. Again, it looks at oppression and war and politics and conspiracy. It's a really, really interesting sci-fi. It has really fun mythos. It has magic in it. It's a win-win across the board. But fully prepare to be traumatized. Just fully prepare to be traumatized. And then the other one that I accidentally pulled out at the same time was Norse Folk Tales, which is actually a more recent one. This one I read in Feb. So Norse Folk Tales was the first pick for my new Patreon book club. So essentially we do a Patreon book of the month where there is a bingo board around the pick and you read books around it and we kind of discuss it in the Discord and on Patreon. And then you also get a bookmark which I designed to go with it. For some reason, they've done this twice now. For some reason, the bookmark always comes out darker than when I colour matched it to the, so that side matches, that side doesn't. I find that so bizarre. But anyway, you get a bookmark that goes with your book. Basically, from certain tiers, you get the book as part of your perks, and if you're in a lower tier, you get to be put in a giveaway, and you could win a free copy or a free book. So it is worth being part of my Patreon, just saying. But Norse Folk Tales, Myths and Legends is a middle grade breakdown of some Nordic mythology and folk tales. A lot of them were ones that I found very familiar. So there was Billy Goat's Gruff and Thumbelina and things like that. I was like, I know those stories quite well. I was disappointed when it actually came to the myths, when it actually came to stories about Loki and other characters in Norse mythology. I was disappointed at just how basic it was. There were only 4 stories, which is fair enough, but they were very superficial, and I thought actually they would inspire a really interesting story of themselves. I would really like to read a Loki-based story, but like a classic Norse mythology Loki-based story, about how he causes certain deaths and how he does really, really dark stuff in Norse mythology. I understand that it is obviously for a middle grade audience. Okay, so it can't delve into everything. It has to be superficial for those contextual reasons. I was just disappointed because I think I expected it to be more like the DK ones where they have a variety of different myths that then build up to something, as opposed to ones that feel like fairy tales. And the real issue that I had with each of the stories was it would start with, and you're now going to find out how Loki caused the death of so-and-so. And then it would end with, and that is how Loki caused the death of so-and-so. And it's just like, okay, I get that that's a technique. I don't need it. Have it at the beginning, have it at the end. You don't need both. It just felt a bit, messy, and it felt a bit safe, which even for a middle grade is what it is. Will I read more by Anika Hussain? Maybe, but I don't know. I'm definitely more interested in Norse mythology at the moment than I have been for a really long time. I'm definitely more of a Greek girly, but For an intro to Norse mythology, I would recommend it. It was just a bit safe for me. We're doing all right for time. I've got about 10 minutes to go. 4 every 10 minutes is not bad. It's not great. I've definitely done more than that before, but it's fine. Next one is another manga. It's Spy and Family. So everyone refers to this as Spy Family, but it's Spy and Family. It's Spy X Family. Basically, this guy right here is a spy, and he needs to get close to a particular person, and to do that, he needs to adopt a young girl so that he can get her into a school so that he can spend time with this person. And in this volume, you meet the young girl that he adopts, who is a telepath. Now, she knows he's an assassin. He doesn't know that she knows, and he doesn't know that she's a telepath. And then later on, he finds out that to get her into this school, he has to have the perfect family life, and therefore he needs a wife. And he has to start building up this family. And he basically finds this woman who, at the time, needs to find a husband very quickly because she is starting to be looked at suspiciously because she's so pretty and not married, and she's an assassin. So she needs to make sure that people aren't looking at her suspiciously because she's doing suspicious shit. So they all just kind of adopt each other and work together as a team. She doesn't know he's a spy. He doesn't know she's an assassin. The telepath knows, but won't talk about it, and is really only obsessed with, I can't remember what the food is. I can't remember if it's like waffles or something, but she's like obsessed with food, and just wants to like hang out with them and is just having a good time. And they make it through the first round of trials to get into this school by just being perfect. And I really, really enjoyed it. It was really, really funny. It's a very, very silly with action-packed manga. It's a very safe manga, but I didn't mind that. This is entry-level manga. It's one of those ones where, yes, the manga's mangaing, but I really like the dynamic between all the characters. I like the setup for the bigger world. I like the setup for the different factions of conspiracy going on. And I feel like factions has been like a key phrase that I've used a lot today, because I feel like a lot of the sci-fis and adventures I've been reading have been pitting one side against another. This is very much that, and yet somehow they are working as a team. I really, really liked it. It's really, really wholesome. I'm really looking forward to reading more of them, and then I'm going to go back to Gavin's vlog where he read all 12, because I feel like I want to enjoy them myself and then enjoy his comments on them. But I'm very aware of that video, and I have saved it in my watch later, Gavin, so I will get back to it because I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm really glad that I did buy. There's a few times where I will buy sequels to things before I've read the first one. I was so convinced I was going to like this that I bought the first 3, and I'm really glad I did, because I have every intention of getting through this series. This is a manga series that I will be completing. Pride by Ibizaboy. This is a Pride and Prejudice retelling set in New York, written by a BIPOC author about BIPOC characters. It very much looks at the gentrification narrative in Pride and Prejudice, and is one of the books that I read for my Pride and Prejudice vlog last year. So it was a while ago. It was July that I read this one. I thought I ticked off all my Julys, but apparently not. There was still one more to go. Really, really enjoyed this. Would recommend this to people who enjoyed Empress and Anaya by Candice Carty-Williams, or if you enjoyed Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Ibizaboy is a novel in verse author as well. So there is like a lyrical tone to his writing in this, which I really enjoyed. I felt like he really understood the dynamics between the siblings of the original, as well as the dynamics in this one. I thought it worked really well. The way the characters kind of support and love each other feels very authentic and modern, whilst not overshadowing the original story, which I really liked and appreciated. I really liked that it has not just a modern setting, but a US setting, because I think you can get a little caught up in the long-bornness of a Pride and Prejudice retelling. I like the fact that these characters work no matter what city it is, but in this instance it's New York. And I really like the fact that in this one, not only is Lizzie Bennet tenacious, because a lot of times like people will kind of misread her as like sarcastic and rude and obtuse. I really like that she's tenacious in this. She is loyal to a fault. She loves her sister, but she's also ambitious. She is also aspiring to certain things, and I really like this modern take on her, and we need to see more BIPOC rep in classics, or classic retellings. So this was a great one. Really, really enjoyed this, and if you've got any other recommendations like this, do let me know. Now the question is do I have time for 2 or 3 more? Okay, the next one is Nimona. Now, I listened to this as an audiobook on Scribd. I don't actually have the book at all. I really liked the audiobook, but what I will say is I preferred the film. The audiobook was fine. It was not quite a full cast. There were some bits that were narrated and some bits that were kind of dialogue. And I really, really liked the kind of subversion of classic fantasy tropes. The film is beautiful. The animation style is stunning. The characters are great. Again, the narrative and subversion is great. I would have loved that as a series. I would love that as a little breakdown murder mystery. They go on missions series. There wasn't enough of the film. I really want to rewatch it. Love Nimona, but I love the film more than I love the book. Okay, it might be 3. I might have time for 3. Just because that one was so quick. Okay, it won't be, because I've got, from September, The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I actually have all 3 Good Girls Guides that I would like to get through, because I put these down essentially as one, because I finished them all within the span of each other. This is the first series that I have read back to back without stopping, without reading anything else in between. I started and finished this series. So the first was gifted to me by Tilly. I will put Tilly's details down below. Go check out her channel, she's lovely. And she basically said that, originally she said we were going to body read it when she bought it for me. And then by the time I actually got to it, she'd already read it, which is hilarious. And she also said that just because I enjoyed this one, she was worried that I wouldn't enjoy the sequels, because either she didn't enjoy the sequels or other people haven't enjoyed the sequels as much. Because they so go off the rails, but I loved it. There is so much to recommend this series. First and foremost, we love an active participant. We love a murder mystery where she gets involved, right? And in this one, you've got Pippa Fitzamobi, who is actively chasing down clues about the disappearance and potential murder of Andy Bell. And basically, she knows that the guy who was convicted, or semi-convicted, but committed suicide before he could be arrested, didn't do it. And not just does she has proof, he used to babysit her. She knows what a good person he is, and she knows his brother semi-well. They end up working together to solve this crime, and I loved it. I loved the kind of step-by-step process that she had, the fact that she's an amateur sleuth, but she does all the things that I think when we're watching murder mysteries or when we're engaging in crime dramas, we're like, why aren't you doing that really simple thing? Why aren't you tracking that really simple thing? I like that everything is solved on page. I like that she, like I said, is an active investigator. She is invested, and in the sequels she's invested for different reasons, and they look more at her PTSD and her trauma around being involved in these things and the horrendous things that happen to her whilst this series is going on. And the last one is straight up wild. I don't know if I agree with the character actions that she makes because of the setup of the first 2, but I loved it. She gets so unhinged, and I loved it. And I really, really liked the friendship dynamic in this. If you are looking for books where it's definitely more of like a platonic friendship narrative rather than a romance one, this has a romance in it, but it is so secondary to the murder and the friendship dynamics. The friendship dynamics are what make this series so good, and the fact that she is such an active participant in solving these crimes. I can't wait to read more by Holly Jackson. I have TBR'd 5 Survive for Feb, and I'm carrying it over because I just didn't get time. And I also really want to read Killjoy, which is from the same series but is a novella. So really, really excited to get to those ones. And I'm also super, super excited because Holly Jackson has another book coming out this year, and I am hyped for it. This was such a good... This genuinely, 5 stars across the board. 5 stars across the board. It was fast-paced, it was energetic, loved the characters, loved the plot, literally could not fault it at all. And the audiobook is really interesting because when it has like the different audio clips with the mixed media style, that works really well as well. Loved it. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Loved it. Okay, I'm going to go with one more. I've got time for one more. And the last one of this wrap up in March is going to be Dear Girls by Ali Wong, which is another one that I did as an audiobook. Now, it's really interesting to me because in December, I listened to the audiobooks by James Acaster and Daniel Sloss, and I was just vibing with listening. Hey, baby. Have you come to say hi? Have you come to say hi? We're just going to take a little kiddie break. Hey. Hey, baby. Yeah, so I was just vibing with comedians and like not quite memoirs, but talking about like their different life experiences and coming up with like life advice. And I really enjoyed, like with James Acaster's Classic Scrapes, that one was really fun because it was just a kind of compilation of silly things that had happened to him. Daniel Sloss was more of a self-help book without it being a self-help book. Again, it was like snapshots of his life and then kind of, and here's the wisdom that you can take from it. And very much like his comedy, almost ranty. Ali Wong's was similar in style, and yet I just didn't enjoy it as much. And that's a shame. I love her stand-up comedy. I adore her stand-up comedy. But I do worry if I've only seen the sanitized versions of her stand-up comedy, because I've only seen her Netflix specials and a couple of YouTube clips from stuff. I haven't seen full sets in person, the same as I have with Daniel Sloss and James Acaster. So I wonder if that's the issue. But I found that the way that she directs half the stories that she tells about her life are so over the top excessive. It's not even that I didn't believe them. I totally believed these things happened to her. I just wasn't sure if I could handle just that much of her personality in telling these stories. So I was kind of dipping in and out, and I found that like I am not a prude by any stretch. I swear like a trooper. And yet I found some of the stuff she was saying so crass and over the top that I just wasn't in the mood for it. And I was just like, this is just a lot. And considering how much personality I've got, like how much I am and how intense I can be, that's what I mean when I'm like, maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it. But what I did really like is there's a couple of chapters towards the end that are, because this is all directed to her daughters. This is all life advice for her daughters and kind of being like, this is what you have to know about your mum kind of thing. And it's wild. But there were a couple of chapters by her husband, who is a far more sedate character. And she kind of paints him as kind of a very supportive, but very put upon court trophy husband in her narrative. And at the end, he is supportive. And the way he talks about her is so loving that I was like, I don't know how much of this persona we're seeing is actually who she is, or if it's just a case of her fighting to find who she was after she had children, because she always wanted to have children, but the way she was treated in the industry she's in dramatically changed. I do think a lot of it is due to the fact that she is Asian American, so the fact that she has to work twice as hard to get what white men get. I don't think it's fair of me to make a one-for-one comparison between her stand-up and Daniel Sloss and James Acaster's, for example. But I do think it's really, really interesting how she talks about the industry. There was a lot to recommend this book. It was just how... it's how she explores it that I was like, you're a lot. But I didn't dislike it. I'm glad I did it as an audiobook rather than trying to read it, because I feel like if I was trying to read it, I probably would have put it down and never picked it up again. I'm glad I finished it, and I would recommend it. If you like her stand-up, I would absolutely recommend. I'm really looking forward to reading. I've got a couple of other stand-up comedians' novels, like memoirs, on my shelves. I've got That Moment When by Mo Gilligan, and I've got The Audacity by Catherine Ryan. And I'm really interested to see how they compare, one as people of colour, but British, and one as a Canadian and a woman in comedy. Are there carries over? Is it my internalized misogyny or internalized racism that I have issues with certain things, the way certain things are presented? Is it that actually what she's doing is telling the truth and I'm expecting some kind of sanitized version to suit my sensibilities? I don't know. I did enjoy it. I think I was just disappointed because I loved her stand-up so much. Going into it, I had really, really high expectations. And not only did it not meet those expectations, it subverted them completely by doing a completely different thing and going on a completely different route. So what I'm saying is, I think the problem with this book is me. And that's fine. Sometimes that is the case when you read. Sometimes you read something and you're like, wasn't for me, wasn't right, etc. And that is what it is. But that is way over my 20 minutes. So I apologise that those last two definitely took us over. That one more than the rest. Let me know in the comments down below, are you more likely to pick up any of these books now that you know what I think of them? Treat yourself to something from Waypoint. The links will be down below. I have a Patreon now, and I keep saying that I'll do a video about it, and I will at some point, but check those links out down below as well, and check out the people that I've mentioned for their great book recommendations and or purchases for me. And most importantly, have a nice day.